how do you balance having a 9 to 5, also being a wedding musician, you're also married, and you have 3 kids?
The beauty of like this day and age is we don't have any excuse.
Most people just don't think like that.
You want to get paid for the events that you do, but there's certain events that you're going to be doing for free that are going to exponentially grow your business. It's more long-term versus short-sighted thinking.
Ron Kao, also known as Virtuous Violinist, is one of the top wedding performers in the US. He's performed at events like the ESPYs for celebrities like Tony Robbins and regularly performs at luxury venues like the Waldorf Astoria and the Ritz-Carlton. A master of branding and presentation, Ron is a California Wedding Day finalist and one of the 6-figure mentors within the luxury musician. Musicians just get stuck in the rut of taking low-paying gigs. They're not seeing the potential that they have to make a ton of money in the luxury markets doing luxury weddings.
I try to automate as much stuff as possible.
That's genius.
The performance aspect of being able to be in front of people and like feel that energy and interact is unmatched.
Most music schools are just teaching people how to play and not necessarily how to perform.
I think we got to think kind of bigger picture. You have to think about where do I want to be 5 to 10 years from now.
Welcome to the 4th episode of the Luxury Musician Podcast. I'm super excited to announce special guest, Ron Kao, also known as the Virtuous Violinist. This is our first in-person podcast episode. Ron, it's great to have you, man.
Thank you, Dan. I love what you're doing for the community. It's great.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, man. How's your weekend been? How's your week been so far?
Weekend's been good. Had an event in Temecula, and it was just like a wonderful event where the bride had this vision of incorporating a voiceover for her bridal entrance. So she had a voiceover. It's kind of trending on TikTok right now.
Okay.
And then she had me play Oceans after that. So I did an instrumental.
Cool.
And it was like just like a really beautiful moment. And for a lot of ceremonies, like I don't usually get emotional. But for this one, I was like almost tearing up. I had to really compose myself during that. So good weekend.
Can relate to that. So for those of you who don't know Ron is a 6-figure wedding and private events musician, and you also have a 6-figure 9 to 5 job. So I think one of the biggest things that I want to ask off the bat is, how do you balance having a 9 to 5, also being a wedding musician that's doing 6 figures, which is something that a lot of people can only aspire to, and then in addition to that, you're also married and you have 3 kids?
Yeah, I mean, when you say it like that, I don't really think about it too much, but it can get a little bit overwhelming, but I just take it day by day. I think, so the violin stuff, it came very randomly. So during the pandemic, and for a lot of people, where they kind of started this artistic venture, in 2020 during the pandemic, it was July 4th, and there was a neighborhood block party. And before this point, I hadn't touched my violin for 4 years. I grew up playing classically for like 18 years. And so my father-in-law was like, hey, why don't you go play for the neighborhood block party? Just play God Bless America and Star Spangled Banner, Party in the USA. And he didn't think I'd say yes, and I did. And so I got my violin out and got in front of the microphone and played. One thing led to another, and he was like, why don't you go put your case out on, at the pier in OC. So I was in Newport, Huntington Beach. One thing led to another. People started asking me, can you play for my wedding? I got a Costco speaker. I, plugged in my XLR into that system, like really learned a lot of things regarding like how to project my sound and like iterating on that.
Right.
And so it just happened super randomly. Like I didn't expect it, or I didn't have a vision of like how this would turn out to be. It just kind of happened organically. And then now, as the business matures since 2020, now I'm really focused on like business strategy, a lot of the aspects of tactics and how to really like scale it even more.
Yeah.
But in terms of your question of like balancing everything, I think it really is just having a really good sense of how to, because the switching cost is really high, of how to just compartmentalize the different tasks. So I'm in marketing operations, and also just marketing, like digital marketing for my company. It's a healthcare tech company. And so just really focus on like, hey, I have this like Pomodoro method, and I don't take exactly like the 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off, but like just for 2 hours at a time, just be very intentional about your efforts for that specific task. And then basically, if then you set aside like an hour and you do admin stuff, thankfully the 9 to 5 doesn't interfere too much with the weekend gigs.
Yeah.
But it definitely, thankfully I'm 28 years old, almost 29. I have a lot of energy. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe like I might have a different answer when I'm 40 years old. So
Yeah. Wow. So we're the same age.
Same age.
28. Wow.
When's your birthday?
It's actually a week from now, 14th.
That's awesome. I'm 29th.
Wow. October?
Yeah, October.
October, baby. Let's look at that.
Yeah.
Love it.
So are you I'm not really into the astrology stuff, but what is it?
Libra,
Libra,
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know what the things are.
What are you?
Apparently a Scorpio.
Scorpio.
People say that's
Love
bad,
it.
apparently. I don't know what that means.
I don't know. It sounds bad, but hey, I mean, you're doing pretty well. So you're married, hey? So yeah. Awesome, man. I mean, that's super cool. So you've been able to build up your business in 4 years as a wedding musician, and you've been able to scale to well over 6 figures in 2 separate businesses simultaneously, or in 2 separate lines of work. And so you talk about compartmentalizing and, the Pomodoro method and all that kind of stuff. So do you schedule out your day beforehand? Do you do that weekly? Do you do that daily? How do you plan out your day? Or is it kind of just like, I get 2 hours here, I'm just going to fit it in where I can? How do you organize your time efficiently?
Yeah, I think there's like a misconception with regards to this whole concept of working hard. I think it's like my motto is like work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
As for many other folks. So it's not mine. But I think putting your head down and like working for, like this 8-hour block, is incredibly inefficient just because you get burnt out. And so I actually think it's more effective to just have really focused blocks throughout the day. Now I'm not very like stringent on that. And now having kids, there's a lot of different variables at play, and wanting to also just be a good dad and also support my wife, and like just really serving her. And so I think it's one of those things where you have to have a structure, but at the same time you have to have that level of flexibility where you can adapt to where when life throws a bunch of curveballs at you. Like, and I'm really blessed to have these 3 kids because it just not only taught me to like work harder. That's kind of what they say. Like, if you want to make more money, just have more kids. And some people disagree with that.
Right.
But it really does truly motivate me to work harder and to provide for them. But I think just having that balance of structure, but at the same time, the adaptability to be able to flex in any certain way is really important.
Okay. So you have your 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So where do you fit in the time to post on social media, the time to, do your email admin? Do you have staff? Are you doing everything on your own? How do you organize that? And where do you typically fit in time to work on the music business?
Yeah. So my sister-in-law, who's now engaged, she got engaged last month.
Awesome.
She has an incredible eye at social, like for aesthetic. And so she's essentially like my social person that I go to. Like, if there's any creative that I need, I kind of reach out to her and like, can you help me out with this? She also comes along with me to events whenever she's available. Now it's a little bit less available just given that she's doing her own wedding planning. Yeah. But she'll come along with me to events to film some content, create some reels. And then I also sometimes hire out some contractors. In terms of the admin stuff, I try to automate as much stuff as I can as possible. And so if someone's like filling out an inquiry form, I'll build in like an automation to where it'll just send an email. And then also just having my own systems internally, just given that I work in tech, having like an operations background, thinking about the back-end systems to be able to kind of automate my life to where, I might not need to hire out the staff And if I just create the structure, it'll make my life a lot easier. Although in the luxury space, you want to give clients that personal touch. As far as like the first step, like that's all automated for me. And then from there, you can kind of see if like a client is a really warm lead or a cold lead. And from there, you can kind of, see if you want to pursue it further as a musician and kind of giving them the best quality experience. Yeah.
I love that. The integration between tech and the music business. I think most people just don't think like that. So that's super smart. I mean, delegation is one part of that, but if you can even remove the need to delegate and just automate, that's even better. So that's genius. So that helps you to save some time throughout your week. How much time would you say that you spend on a weekly basis working on the music business, posting content yourself, going through stuff, handling Zoom calls with clients, just generally working on the music business?
Yeah, so in terms of performances, so with that aspect of the business, I would say it's on average like 6 to 7 hours a week for the performance side of the things. As far as like admin stuff, I think the beauty of like this day and age is like we don't have any excuse. Like if you say, oh, I can't respond to email because of XYZ reason, it's like, dude, you have your phone with you. It's like you can respond to an email.
Right.
You're in the car, like you're just scrolling on social media, like you have the time to respond to a client email that could potentially give you revenue. And so when people kind of say like they have this excuse, like it's just a limiting belief, right? You're like, I need to have perfect conditions where I'm sitting at my computer and I have, this specific font that I need to write with or what have you, or like, and so I think it's just not making excuses for myself and just being like, hey, if I'm watching the kids, like, okay, I have this quick 3 minutes, let me just respond to this client real quick. And so it's more of an ad hoc, like whenever I get the time. But I would say, in all, it's probably about 20 hours or so on the business, because I'm also thinking about business strategy now. And as I think about like networking with planners, something that I haven't done really in the past. A lot of times Bride will just reach out herself.
Yeah.
But one thing I haven't done in the past is really network with different planners and just building like strong relationships with them. And so that's something that I'm focusing on now.
Yeah, that's super important. Tell me more about your approach to networking with planners and how you found that experience.
Yeah, so I've just joined a few like networking like membership clubs, and it's been great so far. I think being able to perform for their networking events like luncheons, whatnot, is a great opportunity, because if you have a great product or a service, what better way to do it for free for this event where they can all see your talents on display.
Yeah.
And so one other thing that I'll leave your listeners with is, I think a lot of times, you want to get paid for the events that you do, but I think we got to think kind of bigger picture, right? There's certain events that you're going to be doing for free that are going to exponentially grow your business in a different way. And it's more long-term versus short-sighted thinking.
Yeah.
And so really getting out of that versus like, hey, I want to make a few $100 on this thing. And if you're not going to pay me that, then I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Especially early on in your career when it's not as mature, you definitely want to kind of use those opportunities. So as I network more with these planners, I have another one coming up in Europe. So I'm trying to network with like international planners and kind of see where that takes me.
Yeah. 100%. I think that's such a great point that a lot of people just don't get, is that short-term versus the long-term mentality. So a lot of musicians just get stuck in the rut of taking low-paying gigs, working at restaurants, clubs, bars, being in wedding bands. And at that point, you might as well just get a 9-to-5 job, because you're looking for security through music when you could be focusing on really building a business and making a ton of money from that and working less and earning more. But people are so focused on the short term that they want to keep accepting these low paying gigs, and they're not seeing the potential that they have to make a ton of money in the luxury markets doing luxury weddings, because they're never taking the time to work on themselves to create the high quality content, to network with planners. And so they just get stuck in doing those low paying gigs because they're just thinking about it in the short term. And like you said, they don't want to take events for promotion, for example, or play at a networking event for free because they're thinking about, I got to make $200. I got to go do the club gig that gives me $400, whatever it is, instead of thinking, if I worked on my music business, I could be making 4,000 with the same amount of time. So how did you transition from, starting where we all start, presumably, which is, doing those lower paying gigs, into getting, multiple $1,000 bookings for a couple of hours of performance?
Well, I think as anything, like the marketing has to meet the product and vice versa. They have to be in a line. I think first and foremost, like when you're starting out, you just got to test, and you got to iterate upon what the best sound would be. I mean, first of all, primarily, foundationally, like if any musician, you have to be a good musician. You have to play the notes. I mean, if we're talking like fundamentals, right? We're stripping away all the things.
Right.
You got to play the notes because even, if you project any bad sound, it's not going to sound great. It's like if you're making some sort of dish, it's like if you just start with poor ingredients, like it's not, or rotten ingredients, it's not going to taste great, unless you're a master chef, or in that case, maybe like a master marketer. But I think so in the beginning it was iterating. I mentioned earlier that I just started playing just with my violin, and I soon thereafter found that like outside, especially at the beach, the sound was not projecting. No one could hear it. So then I just bought a Costco speaker, and then I plugged into that. And I had a little like clip microphone on top of the violin, and it didn't look great. It was like in my face the whole time. But it got the job done. But then what I found is that like the wind would keep going into the microphone, even though I had one of those windscreens. And so it didn't sound great. And so I kept iterating on that. So then I was like, okay, how do I upgrade to this sound platform? How do I really fine tune what that sound is like? But at the same time, like there's many aspects of it. Then it's like, how do I build my brand to look the part when I'm at any event? Even if it's a backyard party that I'm starting out at and I'm only making 200, 300, I'm going to wear a suit to that event.
Right.
I'm not going to wear a t-shirt, with sandals to that event. It's like, they have to imagine, like for clients that have this esteem where they want like the best for not only them, but also for their guests, and have the sense of like, wow, I can't believe you booked that guy. You got to give them a sense of like that feeling where they're just, this kind of imagery and this vision of like, that is, I feel like that's luxury, even though it's in a backyard, under like this easy tent, pop-up tent. And so that's where it starts. Then you just start posting that content. Obviously during that time I was wearing a mask, it was COVID. Wow. So like the content wasn't like great,
right?
But it got me to a point where all of a sudden, like, okay, now you're getting asked to do weddings. You're getting asked to do higher profile corporate events, and then one thing leads to another. Now you're at nicer venues, and all of a sudden you built this, like, even though you're at a different location, you're wearing the same thing to those nice locations. And you have this reputation that now clients can really envision you at their events. And now you can go to the more luxurious weddings, and then hopefully as you scale to the more ultra luxury weddings that have insane budgets. But I think the most important thing is just continuing to iterate and just not rest on your laurels as a musician. I think there's definitely ego involved there. Where musicians think, oh, like, I kind of made it, and you're like, I can kind of chill now. And I think it's one of those things where you always want to like over deliver for your clients. So even though they're paying thousands of dollars, like, you shouldn't have the ego to be like, well, I am so great, so I'm just going to, just be me, and I'm just gonna show up and just do, you really want to kind of have that sense of like, I want to over deliver for what they are paying for that product. And so they'll feel like they got to steal every time, and so And so that, I think it's just having that growth mindset of always being a learner is the most important thing.
I love that. Yeah, 100%. And when it comes to over delivering, how would you say you do that? Because you also don't want to kind of let people step over your boundaries when it's, they booked you for 2 hours. If they ask you to stay for another hour, obviously you're not going to do that for free, right? So how do you over deliver while still respecting your own boundaries?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those things where as the business matures, and the more you post on social media, the more the clients will see how you are at cocktail hour, how you are at ceremony. So they have this vision of who you are. I think it's definitely meeting the mark there. But then beyond that, it's those kind of moments where it's one of those as a bride, you want your wedding to be an amazing FOMO moment for anyone that was unable to attend.
Yeah.
Right. So if you deliver that FOMO moment where it's you're just in the middle of the aisle, and they're getting that aerial shot, that drone shot, and a lot of times brides can't hear a lot of the music that you're playing, at least during the cocktail hour. Definitely during the ceremony, they can hear some of it, but they're in their own head, right? And they're super stressed out during that time. They're just trying to make sure that everything's perfect. And so I would say over delivering in the sense that you're interacting with the crowd, engaging with the crowd. Right. You're not just playing notes, or you're not just, so I'm a strolling violinist. You're not just simply playing the correct notes for that particular song. You're really engaging with the guests in a very classy way, because you don't want to be overbearing to where they're just he's in my space. You got to really feel the moment. And it's definitely intuition and kind of that sense, but I would say it is trainable. So it's
100%.
So yeah, I would say it's really the next step would be the engagement and the interaction with the guests that really takes it to a whole nother level.
100%. Yeah, I was actually talking about this in one of my coaching calls yesterday, and so many musicians are timid, right? They're shy, and they're amazing musicians. They hit all the notes. They have a great tone. They know all the songs. They're just super talented, Berkeley graduates. But what they don't teach you is actually how to perform, right? How to interact with people, how to be engaging. Most music schools and institutions are just teaching people how to play,
right?
Not necessarily how to perform and how to capture people's attention and how to be immersive and entertaining. And that's something that you are incredibly good at. I've seen on your Instagram, you got tons of high quality videos of you engaging with people, and you have this energy, and you're definitely not shy. So was it always like that, or was that something you had to train?
So I would say I'm more on the side of growing up, I was definitely more on the side of being outgoing. I think being it's interesting. So I went through kind of different phases, and as I get older, I would say I'm definitely more reserved. Interestingly enough, just naturally, I feel like, and I don't know if this is just a product of maybe having kids or whatnot, or I don't know. But I would say over time I've become a little bit more reserved, but I know when to turn it on, and so there's moments for everything. I like to kind of be in my own kind of headspace, praying, just being really, really into my faith. And so being kind of having my quiet time as I get older. I think how this all started, actually, interesting story is, I was in high school. It was my freshman year, where it was Valentine's Day, and some of the how a guy kind of sends a carnation to a girl during Valentine's Day, so it was a rose.
Yeah.
Some guy asked me, hey, I know you're really good at the violin. Why don't you go play with the carnation delivery? And so he was play anything, John Mayer, Maroon 5, something romantic, right?
Okay.
So that's kind of my foray into quote unquote performance violin, not in an orchestral or recital setting.
Yeah.
So this is where I was actually strolling and then kind of like playing in front of a classroom. And I always enjoyed performances. Like I always had a knack for that. Like I really loved being in front of people playing and seeing like people's reactions, because I really wanted to get that visceral reaction. That was really fun and like energizing for me. And so that was my foray into performances. And then, people asked me to play for their promposal. So I would play for them.
Nice.
And so the thing is, like, all that, like, since high school up until like when I was like 23, basically, like, there was no violin performance. Like,
right.
I didn't perform at all. And so it wasn't something that I thought about really. But I would say that I was pretty outgoing, like joining a fraternity. But then through that experience, and at this point I'm kind of rambling, but just joining a fraternity and like having to be in that environment where it's like a bunch of guys, like 150 guys, and it's like you have to like drink and party and do all these different things. Or like when you're a pledge, you're just being hazed. You just have to do what they do, and you have to just be like, you have to be that dude. But it's like I soon thereafter learned, like after 3 years, I was like, I don't want to be part of this environment. I was always craving like a different type of experience where that also wasn't like, and not to bash fraternities, because it's a great group of guys that there's camaraderie, but there is some sort of toxicity there where they might like if you're trying to get the certain girl or whatnot, or drink this, and like there's also drugs involved, all that stuff, right? And so I was a very different person back then, but you're trying to find yourself. And so when being from New York, and I went to Indiana, and then coming to California here in LA, and then I soon thereafter I met my wife, my now wife, and I've kind of really evolved during that time, personally and professionally. I think I started taking things seriously, where previously I was just kind of like trying to have fun, and I think honestly what it is, because I do work in tech and in a more serious kind of logical left brain kind of job, playing music is such a great balance to that.
Right.
And it allows me to really let go. And so it's kind of like a breath of fresh air from my 9 to 5. And so it is my creative outlet. I did talk about business strategy. You definitely want to focus on that as you mature as a business. But the performance aspect of being able to be in front of people and like feel that energy and interact is unmatched, where people see you like as this micro celebrity, if you will, where they're like, oh my gosh, like it's amazing to have you here. And then you get to like weave in and out of the crowd, and like, you're dancing with the grandma, like playing violin. Like it's an unmatched experience. So I'm truly grateful.
Yeah, it's definitely an awesome industry to be in. I think a lot of musicians, we just forget how cool it is to be able to make a living from playing music, right? But it sounds like you have both worlds. You got your 9 to 5, you got the left brain stuff, you got the right brain, creative outlet. And what was the turning point for you at which you started really taking stuff seriously? What made you make that change?
As far as the music stuff?
Yeah.
So I was a pre-med. So I studied neuroscience in college, and then I went to grad school here in Southern California, like public health, and eventually the goal was to attend medical school and be a doctor.
Yeah.
So this was kind of the agreement that I had with my parents. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor, man.
Right.
It was one of those things, you're an Asian kid and your immigrant parents, like, that's kind of the expectation. Yeah. At least have some sort of steady job that will make 6 figures. And when I was pre-med, I didn't have any job. I grew up in a very like privileged household. And so I'm very grateful for that. But I didn't need a job.
Got it.
And so to that end, I didn't have any experience. And so when I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And so I worked for free for someone like a doctor growing her business. I worked as a scribe, like in a urgent care setting, making $12 an hour. I basically, that's kind of where it started.
Yeah.
And then eventually I landed my first tech job as a coordinator, and then moved to a different company, where, now it is about 6 figures. But basically the where it came from is this drive to this ambition to want to provide for the family and have this sort of autonomy to where I don't have to be beholden to a company, or I don't have to be beholden to, a boss, if you will. That was and you have to know thyself, right? I mean, if you're someone that works really well in that sort of setting, power to you. But for me and for a lot of fellow musicians that are aspiring to be luxury musicians, they want to have that sort of autonomy where they're more entrepreneurial, if you will. And so that was a huge motivating factor. Another part of that was taking away the risk of a layoff from a company. I think that's another thing too, because a lot of people invest so much of their time and resources into one thing, and they don't think about the diversification of, if this thing doesn't pan out, especially these last 2 years, where there's a bunch of layoffs, like, you get a severance for 6 months, but then what are you going to do after that? And so that was a huge, like, as I thought about it more and more, like as I played more gigs, then I was like, oh yeah, this is also a way to de-risk from that thing happening, inevitably for a lot of folks. And so when I speak about diversification, there's also like the real estate side of things too. Like you want, like as you think about being a musician, like you have to think about, where do I want to be 5 to 10 years from now? Is that playing more gigs, or is that like playing more gigs at the same cost, or playing the same amount of gigs at a higher cost, or playing more gigs at a higher cost? Or like, what combination of that do you see yourself doing in 10 years? Or is it like that, because I enjoy performances where I have that autonomy to where I can pick which gigs that I want to do, but then also like have this side stream of income to where I don't have to do it. You have, whether that's Airbnb or long-term rental, you have that revenue stream to where it gives you that flexibility. And so I think it's just always growing, like having that, again, going to the growth mindset, like not being closed off to different avenues, because I didn't see myself being a musician at all up until 2020.
That's crazy.
So it was never something that I envisioned. Like, it was either going to be a doctor or someone working in technology. And so I am very grateful, like providentially, like I've had a lot of those skills that I've learned can be applied to the violin business, because there's operations, there's a lot of back end stuff, technology, marketing, branding, all that stuff is really applicable. And so, I think, I don't know if Steve Jobs said it, but basically taking, like, being in a certain industry and then being like thrown out of that industry and all of a sudden starting in a new one can be the best thing that can happen to you, because you can take some of those skills and apply it and have innovation in that other one.
100%. Yeah. Combining those two different things.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to make yourself unique and make yourself valuable, is to combine two usually non-related things, right? And that's something that I did back 10 years ago. I was playing sax and I was DJing, which at that time, basically no one was doing, and when someone suggested it to me, I was like, oh, that's absurd. Like, no one would want a sax playing DJ. Like, come on, what is this? It's just silly. But I tried it out, and actually it really took off to the point where now people are literally making memes about all of these sax players that are starting to DJ, which is just hilarious to me, because I was there at the beginning of that, like 10 years ago. But the reason that I was able to, turn that into a successful business model, I think, was because it was such a unique thing at the time. So being able to, and obviously those aren't two different industries necessarily, but it's kind of combining being a musician with being a DJ, which a lot of people see as two kind of separate things. So I definitely see where you're coming from with that. So how have you combined your tech job with your music? You mentioned automations. Are there any other things that you've learned from the tech job that you've kind of implemented into the music business that's enabled you to scale as quickly as you have?
Yeah, so I think there are a few nuggets, learnings, if you will, in terms of marketing.
Yeah.
I think with marketing, you always have to just test different channels, just being open to spending some sort of like financial investment in those channels. And so whether that's digital marketing with Google Ads, whether that's Instagram ads, whether that's any other type of medium in getting your name out there, I've tested these things.
Okay.
I think it's interesting because with something like Google Ads, if you're not trying to be a commodity, like let's say you're you have some sort of like rental, like table rental business or
Right.
some sort of chair rental.
Right.
It's and if you really want to be in that luxury musician space, then what I found is that it's really not effective because you just get a bunch of leads that are very budget conscious.
Got it.
That are looking just for a violinist. They're not necessarily looking for an amazing violinist or an amazing performer that'll really enhance their day. They're just looking for a violinist.
Okay.
And so they view it as a commodity. And so what I've learned through that is that I wouldn't say wasted spend. It's just like a learning, right? I think you just, so as someone, that has that experience in marketing, I think you just have to just be open, like, especially with like website operations, conversion rate optimization. When you think about the website, I'm kind of currently going through a revamp and rebrand.
Cool.
But you just have to be open to like continuing to test the boundaries of what you think will work. And if it doesn't work, that's fine, right? Then you're like, okay, cross it off the list, right? So you just have to have these certain hypotheses and then just like go ahead and test, and have no ego about it. I think, so I would say the big things are marketing and then the operations, like the back end, like automation stuff when it comes to like emails, when it comes to like automate, like reminding me. So I have my systems in place to where I know exactly my calendar. I don't have any doubt about it.
Right.
Also, like when it comes to also like accounting too, right? Like all that stuff can all be warehoused into
That's great.
the system. So there's a lot of things. Like this is a plug for Airtable. It's a database platform. I would say it's like Google Sheets on steroids.
Oh, okay.
So
wow.
I would highly recommend Airtable. I'm not sponsored at all. I wish I was.
Sure.
But I recommend it for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. So, couple quick questions that I'd love to ask on this podcast. Starting off with, if you could rewind time and you could go back to 2020 when you were starting off your business as a violinist, doing private events and weddings, how would you scale to that six-figure point? Let's say you had a year to do that, gun to the head. What would you do if you had no other choice? How would you scale as quickly as humanly possible with your 9-to-5 that you had?
I would invest in the best suits and tuxedos.
Wow. Yeah.
I would look the part.
Yeah.
I would make sure that that all of when I arrive at a destination, they know that they got the best. I think the look is definitely super important for a bride. Not just the look, but also the colors, because you kind of fit in with the color scheme. And this is what I've learned actually more recently, which is like just ask them like if there's any certain like color scheme.
Right.
Because when you take content of that, like a bride really wants to envision you at her event, and she's like, oh wow, like he wore that white tux, or he wore that black tux, or navy blue tux, or whatever it is, and like it fit in so perfectly with the shot.
Right.
And so if we're marketing to like brides, like who are the predominant population demographic that are like contracting with us, you have to wow them. So beyond like, obviously, as we said, foundationally, playing the music is really important.
Right.
But really looking the part and elevating that aspect, your wardrobe, is incredibly important. And I couldn't like emphasize that enough.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So for those listening, where do you get your suits from?
So my tuxedos, Ted Baker.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So Ted Baker is definitely good. Just like quality stuff, and definitely get it tailored. I think
Yep.
definitely like the quality, but then you got to get it tailored, man.
Yeah.
Like,
100%.
and just work out. Just work out, man.
Yeah, 100%.
You know?
Yeah,
Like,
that's important.
You gotta look the part too. And this is beyond just like, obviously playing the notes are incredibly important, but I would say like if you really want to elevate and get to that level, you really got to work out, and just wear a really nice wardrobe. Another thing I would say is just being like making an effort to talk to, converse with not just the guests and everyone around, like that's at the space, but the planners.
Oh yeah.
The planners are critical.
Of course. They're the most important. Really.
And having a great relationship with them, which is something that I really haven't done like previously, which is why a lot of my focus now is talking with planners. So I would say like those aspects for sure.
Yeah. I should say equally important, obviously.
Yeah.
Your clients, it's their special day. But from a music business perspective, the planner is also your client.
Yeah.
Right? You have to build a good relationship with them because they can help you out tremendously and you can help them tremendously as well. So that definitely makes sense. So before we wrap up, final question is, you've talked about how you would scale your business as quickly as possible if you were to start again, and the importance of appearance, obviously being an amazing musician as well. If there was one thing you could tell yourself back, let's say 2020, or even before then, you've talked about limiting beliefs. Maybe you could touch on that, but what would you say to yourself if you could rewind time and, you know, the you now could go back to your 23, 24-year-old self and just say, hey man, go.
Yeah. I would say just trust the process. Like, I think as the business grows, you have this, and as you think more about the business, you have this vision of like where it could be. And the thing is, like, if you see a little bit of early success and some of the momentum, but then like the following year, you don't have that exact same momentum.
Yeah.
It's okay. Just trust the process and just keep testing, and just trust that like there's macro factors where inflation, like people might not have as much money to spend on weddings, or, you know, maybe there's just macro competition in the space, but just continue to like post, continue to just push out more content, continue to like level up your attire, and then also level up your sound quality from your instrument. So the thing is with the journey, like in 2020, like I definitely saw immediate success like in that year in 2021, and there's kind of like a dip in 2022. And then like part of me starts questioning, like what's happening here? Am I hitting my ceiling with my earning potential with the violin stuff? Because once you start earning like some money, like immediately, you kind of think, oh yeah, this is gonna take off. It's gonna be like 5x, 10x, you know, in just a few years. And that's never the case. I mean, very seldomly the case.
Right.
And so I think just giving yourself some grace in that, just keep doing what you're doing and like show your passion to what you're doing. And it'll be shown like through your content, and be shown through the planners that see you playing at events, and just keep on going, like keep on doing it. Yeah. I think like people think of growth as like this linear type of thing. Like it's never the case. I think it is one of those things where we're able to, or I think it's one of those things where you just have to endure those trying times and like that kind of like oscillating roller coaster, if you will, in any business. And you just got to kind of push through it. Yeah. So I would say like just don't get so addicted to that like easy money in the beginning.
Right. Beginner's luck.
Beginner's luck, right? It kind of draws you in,
Yeah.
but just don't get hooked on that, right? And just know that like this is a long game.
Yeah.
Whether you're going to be performing in 10 years or you're going to be doing real estate or or you're going to be building an agency, whatever the case may be, like this is a long game. And like I would say just every year, maybe at the end of the year, just kind of reassess where you've come the last few years and kind of take it year by year. But don't view things in terms of, oh, this year was bad, so like the next few years will be bad too.
Right.
So just kind of take it with a grain of salt. Yeah.
Love it, man. Trust the process.
Trust the process.
100%. Yeah. Awesome. Well, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I think what you're doing with this luxury musician group is really incredible. I think like growing awareness of the space is wonderful, because I think there are a lot of people just don't have the knowledge in terms of clients that are reaching out, don't have the knowledge of like what it costs for this type of performer.
Oh yeah.
Like what that entails, like what's the scope and breadth of what that performer will provide, and also just educating the performers to level up the whole industry. And so I think the more knowledge that can be shared, the better, because not only will it kind of create more musicians that are wonderful, that are incredibly talented, and that have that that kind of that have that bravado, if you will. But it also like improves, it really levels up all the musicians.
Yeah.
Because now they know like, oh, there's kind of more entrance into the space. And it just really buoys up the whole industry, because now it's like there's going to be more high quality musicians.
Awesome.
So it's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you,
Dan. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the 4th episode of The Luxury Musician, starring special guest Ron Kao. We had an awesome conversation. We touched on a lot of super interesting topics. I appreciate you, the listener, tuning in for this and gaining the wisdom from Ron during our conversation. Please go follow Ron on all social media platforms. It's Virtuous Violinist on Instagram. Are there any other social medias that people should be aware of?
That's it. Virtuous Violinist.
That's it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Fantastic. And if you are looking to up your game inside of the private event space, do go check out my Instagram @DanGood to learn more.